one. So when are we doing this? Are we just randomly going up to him and saying, which one's lunch, which one's bathroom, and 18 out of which 25 days? And this doesn't really tell me what I'm supposed to be doing. So how could we fix this? All right, what's our condition? When are we going to measure this? So I would start this one with the word given. Given that these things happen, given that we ask him on the way to lunch, hey, Daryl, which one is? He will answer, and I would get rid of the 18 out of 25 days, and I would use a percentage. There's another one. When talking to the teacher, the student will think critically before answering 7 out of 9 opportunities. What's wrong with this one?
You can't measure somebody's thinking.
Right. What we have here is the main verb, think. Can't be measured. I think we can measure this, but the way it's worded, we can't. We'll fix it. But what we've got here is another problem. Same as this last one. How do we know exactly how many days this will go? What if they're absent? What if, wouldn't it make more sense to just put a percentage in there? Of days that we measure, it will be at this percentage. That way you don't have to count these days, which just doesn't make any sense to have to count the days. Cliff will identify peer conflicts and walk away 100% of the time. What does that 100% of time refer to? Is he identifying conflicts 100% of the time? Or is he walking away 100% of the time? Or both? I'm not sure what Cliff is doing. And what am I monitoring as I walk around all day? Cliff's not identifying conflicts right now. I don't know what I'm looking for. This needs to be fixed. Andrea will be able to read 10 minutes without getting up. 7 out of 10 times, 80% of the time, which is one I took off of a real IEP. I will have no idea when she's met this because she has to do it 70% of the time, 80% of the time. And I'm not exactly sure what that means. Plus the fact that I think right now she might be able to. It doesn't say she has to do it, only that she's able to. This is not a very good one. Fiscus will stop running in the hall 100% of the time forever. Even the 100% of the time isn't very good because what that says is, I will monitor Fiscus 24/7 everywhere he goes to make sure, and you're not. I would say, when in the hall, as my condition, because it doesn't make sense without that. So let's go and let's see if we can fix these. I'm going to see if we can do them better. Given 2 lines and a teacher question each day, so now what I've set up is, here's what I do every day. There's 2 different lines, one to the bathroom, one to the lunch line, and I ask him a question every day. He will verbally state, so last time I just said identify. How? He will verbally state the line to the bathroom or lunch with 72% accuracy. And how I got 72% accuracy is before it said 18 out of 25, which I guess is 72%. But what this does is it tells me, here's when I measure, here's exactly what he needs to do, and here's how I'll know if it's working. This is the one for thinking critically. Given a math problem orally, Joe will work the problem out on paper before responding orally in 7 out of 9 opportunities for 3 consecutive days. Now, I still think this should be a percentage. If I was changing this to make it really good, that should be a percentage. At the end of 9 days, is what I would say. Given a peer conflict, Cliff will walk away 100% of opportunities. Because these are opportunities. Given that he sees a conflict, there's your opportunity. Does he handle it correctly? He has 2 choices. Walk away or not walk away. So when do I measure on this one? When there's a peer conflict. If there's no peer conflict, I'm not measuring anything. That's why I really like that controlled presentation one. Because it lets us decide when we want to measure. I'm only going to measure when he does this. So I'm only measuring, the way this was written before, I'm following him around to see if he's seeing conflicts. Now, if I see a conflict, I just say, what's Joe going to do about this? Now I measure. During instructional lesson times, Andy will remain seated for at least 10 minutes in 7 out of 10 opportunities for 3 consecutive days. So when am I measuring? During instructional lessons. Not all day, not everywhere she goes. I only measure under those conditions. And what am I looking for? That she'll remain seated 10 minutes, which is really a duration. I'm going to say, when I say, hey, it's instructional time, will she stay seated for 10 minutes? That's all I'm asking myself. So I start timing her. If it's less than 10, it's a no. Really simple to collect that data. And given that Fiscus is in the hallway, he will move about by walking during 90% of intervals observed. Let's make our interval 5 minutes. Let's make it 2 minutes. He's never going to be walking from one point to the next for longer than 5 minutes, probably not 2. But if you made it 5 minutes, what that says is, during every 5 minutes that I walk down the hall with him, at the end of that time he's in the hall, I'm just going to put a plus or a 0. Did he do it or not do it during that time? Do it right. Did he walk the whole time or not walk the whole time? It allows me to do this in the simplest way possible. So what I want you to always be thinking about is, first, always decide what you want to do to measure. Then take that measurement and apply it to this. And say, how can I say when I'm going to measure that? So I want to measure it under these circumstances. And I want the kid to do this. And then I put in my measurement thing. And here's how much I want to see. That's the way to write it, to make sure that you are doing the least amount you have to do. Again, you can write really big, complicated, scientific looking things, but then you've got to do it. So I would like to do it the opposite way. I think the objective should be the last thing you do after you decide all the other pieces. What do we want from this kid? How can I measure that? When would I be able to measure that? Now write your objective. Now you've written a legal, measurable instruction objective. Are we all done with all 5 minutes? Okay, so I'm just rambling then. Okay, stop. I want you to check your reliability on that one. On this one, you have to check box by box. How'd you do reliability? Every time you got the right answer on both boxes, that counts as a 1. Anytime you got different answers, that counts as a 0. So you should have some number divided by 5. If they're the same in every box, you'll have 5 divided by 5, you'll have 100%. If you have less than that, then you'll have less than that. So see what your reliability is.
On the first one for Darrow, the 25 days, is that 25 consecutive days or random?
It depends on how you depends on how you wrote it. That doesn't say consecutive.
Okay.
But what that probably means is, and that's a really good point, that probably means within 25 days of when we wrote this objective.
Okay.
Okay, how many of you got 100% reliability on this last time? A lot more people. Now there are a couple of reasons for that. One, it's easier to get reliability for people to agree on the time-based system because you don't have to agree on individual events, you just have to agree on the bigger picture. 2, you already had a chance to practice with it earlier, so that may also have had something to do with it. And I know, again, you're not working real hard at the same time you're doing this, but which one was easier to do? The second one, because you didn't have to continually think about it. That's what I'd urge you to think about when you do this in your classroom. It basically comes down to this. If it gives you an index of what's going on with that kid, then that's a good objective. Then you have to just think, how do I make that work? How do I make that fit in? What's the simplest way for me to do it? And accuracy is okay to lose a little bit for the sake of being able to do it. The most accurate system in the world that you can't do is worthless. So you've got to find the balance, but you can't unbalance it to where it's so simple that it really is meaningless, because then what's the point? So think about always, can I use a tool? Can I use these kinds of things? Something that makes it really simple. I think if you're using a stopwatch, it's not simple, but some things need a stopwatch. So I would think about the clickers, the paper clips, those kind of things. Think about using the control presentation where you decide when you measure. I will measure whenever someone says this, whenever I say this. Those are control presentations. I'm only going to measure under those conditions. When a student calls him a name, he will. Then I only measure when they call him a name. When I ask him a question, he will. Then you only measure when you ask a question. So think about those things. And then think about, can you use time-based to make it simpler? And if it's a high rate behavior especially, time-based can really be helpful. Questions?
Suggestions for something like lying that you don't know at the time.
Lying?
Yes, we have a real issue right now with the student case study I brought. There's a real issue with lying, and it's affecting social, academic, time management, responsibility, and everything, because he's telling us a story that we don't know possibly ever if it's a story, and sometimes we don't know until later.
Okay, let me ask this. Is it lying in response to a query from you, or is it just volunteering bizarre stories? Okay.
It's about stuff like, did you bring your poster board? Yes, it's in my locker. The next person asking, did you bring your poster board? No, I left it at home. Tells the teacher, yes, I have it in my locker. When he's finally asked to go get it, no, I don't have it. So it happens to multiple, it's a high school student.
Right.
So responsibility is a real issue, and it's affecting grades and academics.
What you have here are a couple of different issues. One is lying in response to being irresponsible. I have not done what I'm supposed to do, I didn't do this correctly, etc. I'll lie about it to not have to accept responsibility. All of which I would say the function of that is to avoid having to take responsibility. But then there's a whole different set of lies that are, last night Michael Jackson came over to my house, which is attention seeking. So I think they're really two different kinds of issues. One of them is a controlled presentation. When asked a question about something, how does the student respond? And the second one is, it's similar to stealing, actually, the second one. And what you have to say is, given opportunities to tell stories, or given that the student tells a story, it's verifiable. How you verify it, now what we used to do with stealing is, I want a receipt. And I mean, literally, when I worked in residential, kids come back with these things. Where'd you get that? Oh, you have a receipt? Then it's not yours. If you're a kid that we've had stealing problems with, it's just a policy. No receipt, it's not yours. Don't bring it here without a receipt, because it's not yours. With lying, it's hard to get a receipt. It's hard to verify that. Who can I call to verify that? But that's where you're gonna, when someone tells a story like that, what you're gonna have to do is randomly verify. And then say, given that student has told a story and we will verify correctly X number of opportunities. You then get to decide how often you verify, because you can't verify everything they do. And a lot of things are probably unverifiable. I saw a ghost. Well, you can't verify that. But you have to figure out how you can. And if they are all unverifiable things like I saw a ghost, then what you have to do is say, student will minimize, it's almost like a DRL. We want to reinforce lower rates of those kinds of stories. So we just don't want you telling. Any story that's unverifiable, we really just don't want you to tell. We'll give you one a day. You get one unverifiable story a day. Anything more than that, and then your goal on your objective is student will tell no more than X ridiculous stories per day. So it just really depends upon who that kid is and how it's all fits together. Those are always harder.
The shorter the interval, just take for example, when you're up there. So we were doing your hand in your pocket. So out of those 5 minutes, you did it twice. But in reality, you really did it 12 times in that period. So how would you decide as a behavior detrimental with your student, or is that just up to you? Is 2 times in the pocket maybe not detrimental because you did it, but if the real deal was 12 times in that period, now that's detrimental, let's say. So how do you...
First of all, you have to figure out, is your data collection system giving you a reflection of that behavior that'll allow you to say better or worse? The system you're using isn't sensitive enough, it sounds like, to really pick that up. So that's the first issue. The second issue is how much is good or how much is bad. It's one, a team decision for a group of people to say, what do we think? And two, it's what do we think, it's a guess, what do we think would be good enough for that kid to get better grades, to be, where's my threshold of where this is going to make a difference for that kid? And right, we don't want to write objectives for things that we don't think are going to make a difference. But sometimes we just don't know. And so we say, well, I'll bet if that kid didn't do that, they'd get a lot more work done. Well, we can get that to go down, but if we get that to go down and work doesn't get done, well, that really wasn't part of it. And so then I think we need to rethink the whole behavior, not just the objective. But I think a group making those decisions makes it easier.
What kind of monitoring system would you recommend for an incident that's kind of intense but only happens every couple of weeks for a short period of time?
I would implement what we sometimes call a behavior earthquakes system. And what that is it's a log. And when you see that behavior happen, you write it in a log. And then we get together at meetings and we bring our logs. It's really a tally system, but it's more than just a tally. We all know he got in 3 fights, but in my log I'm gonna write, he got in a fight doing these things, and then your tallying system is still less than X number of those earthquakes, but you have more information than just a tally when you get together to talk about it. You can actually, if you log those correctly, turn it into an ABC for functional assessment.
When you're doing the data collection, should you not give any reminders to the students so that you'll actually get accurate results, like if you're shouting out?
It depends. I mean, if you say, you know, in order for this kid to be successful, I'm going to use prompts, and I'd write it right in the objective. Given that we have this and teacher prompts, kid will blah, 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 blah. No, I wouldn't. The objective is just to see if the kid's getting better. You want the kid to get better, so whatever you think you have to do to make the kid get better should be part of the package that we put in place. The monitoring system is just saying, given that package that includes prompts and blah, 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 is it working? And if it's not, then maybe we need bigger prompts. But it's okay to even write the prompts right in as part of the objective if you think it's necessary. But I wouldn't worry about are we interfering with data collection. I would worry about, are we making the kid get better?
How can you handle someone that comes to you with an issue that you don't feel is an issue, that an autistic kid and the teacher wants him to work in a seat? And reality is, he does his work best on the floor or here and there, but she wants him in his seat, and she wants data collection done. But yeah, I'm kind of like, I don't think so.
Well, there's a difference between behavior that's disruptive and a behavior that's disturbing. This one sounds like it's disturbing to the teacher. It's not disruptive to the class or the student. And really, ethically, I would say we have issues with intervening on behaviors that are only disturbing to teachers and not disruptive to the kid or the environment. However, if that teacher wants that to happen, they're gonna make life miserable for that kid until it does. One of the things that I think would be good to demonstrate for the teacher is to go in and do data collection on what she really wants for that kid. And say, look, that kid gets more work done sitting there than there. What's the goal for this kid in your class? To get work done. So we can work toward moving him back toward his chair, but if that's gonna be all you worry about, you're gonna sacrifice this to do that. And when you say, I believe he does as much down there, well, that's really an empirical question. Does he? And if he does, then I think you've got great evidence to say that's not a good goal. Now, if she comes in and says, I think he'll do more sitting there, that's an empirical question. So I would look at both situations and see what the case is. But yeah, if it's not doing the kid any good and not doing the class any good, then I would pick your battles. And you know, that's not a battle I want to fight. I'm sure there are other things that would make things better.
Similar circumstances with autism, and they wanted me to see, but they wanted me to see because it keeps escalating to running out of the room, where they're chasing instead of containing. So it's like they want in-seat behavior because if they give them time, the more he's in his seat, he's not at the door, he's not trying to escape the classroom.
Well, in-seat behavior would be a replacement for running away, but there are other replacements also. Staying in the room is also a replacement. So I would go for, whenever you do a replacement behavior, what's the simplest behavior you could possibly ask for and have it happen? I think your replacement of staying in the room is going to be easier to achieve than your replacement of staying in seat. Once you get them to stay in room, then you can say you're successful, let's move now towards staying in seat. But it seems to me you've got a task analysis here of, here's where we are now, here's where we want to be, and you've set your goal up here, and it seems to me there are some steps that you go after those baby steps and make it successful and work your way there. If you go after the big step, hey, we can add and subtract. Great, let's do calculus. Well, you could beat them over the head with calculus all year and they're not going to be as successful as if you went to algebra and worked your way up. And I think that's what you have to think about. Okay, I've gone over my time. So we're going to take a break and then we're going to come back and we're going to ask people to come up and give their little case studies. And if you do, we're going to give you one of these. So if you don't have a case study, you can make one up during break. 15 minutes? 10 minutes?
Yeah, 10. Why don't we try and come back at 11:15 because lunch is at 12:15.
Okay.
Give us 1 hour.
Coming back from lunch?
Let's do 45 minutes, 12:15 to 1. And if you could go out this door and then go to the end of the table. Let's do 45 minutes, 12:15 to 1. And if you could.
So, who would like to go first? Pocket or clip it on.
Okay.
And we'd like to start having people present their case studies. And the case studies can be in any form of, this is our superstar kid, to this is, we can't figure this one out at all, to we're halfway done, to whatever. I mean, the idea is just to kind of get an idea of what other people are doing and to have a chance to kind of ask questions of what other people think and kind of group discuss. So, and anybody who does it gets a free tally counter. So, who would like to go first? Who would like to go?
All right, we have.
Great. You have to come up here.
Sure.
Anything, Bob?
You have to wear this. That's the only stipulation. Your pocket or clip it on.
Okay. We have a student who, with only 9 weeks into the year, is already doing his best to fail. And we, after last meeting, decided that probably the function was trying to gain control of a situation he feels he has lack of control of, and possibly escape from trying to not graduate from high school because it's a safe environment. He lives in a really bad environment. And that's been an excuse for his whole life since he was 3. And we keep hearing that, again and again, you don't know how bad his life is, and we keep saying again and again, we can't change that. We have to change what we can change at school and get this kid to be a responsible adult and into society, because he's a really smart kid, very smart kid. And so we've met with Raven, and we've instituted the check-in, check-out since the last session, because there were a lot of social conflicts between some younger students and he that he's real manipulative of. But he's also the liar I was talking about. And so we never knew who caused the trouble on the bus or who caused the trouble at home or who's causing the trouble at school. And that's been a really hard thing to target because he is extremely smart and an extremely gifted liar. And you just believe him with all your heart and soul and find out 5 minutes later he said something different to the mainstream teacher, and then of course you just feel totally frustrated with the whole situation. So the check-in and check-out has worked
it's helped on one extreme in that it's separated the kid. We've made the three of them who are having social conflicts all check in and check out. And because he was the one who was in the most trouble with grades, whoever got to check in first got to pick where they were going. And so that person, let's say they chose the library. Our school has block schedules and they have 30 minutes in the beginning of the day where it's kind of like free time if they don't have a required resource or they don't have to be at a teacher's catching up or something. They can be pretty much anywhere. And so the first person in, an advantage to getting in first was you got to say where you wanted to be. And no one else could pick, the other two couldn't pick that spot. So we were kind of naturally segregating them unless they needed to be with us because they weren't doing well in a class, but then they were in our presence because a lot of this was happening when they were out of our presence. So for many of the days in the last month since we've been here, we've had all three of them in the room together, but there are three teachers in the room together and we could see that they weren't planning anything bad or doing stuff. There's been a real issue on the bus, and that we feel like is kind of out of control. We've tried a lot of seating charts that the aide on the bus hasn't upheld. We've tried, look straight ahead and wear your iPod, and that hasn't all worked. But we finally decided that that's something we just can't spend much more time on because I'm not willing to ride home to Aurora with him and sleep overnight. So in the classroom, though, we've the check out has been most effective for him because not only have we just made him check out and say what he has to do that day, but we've made him go through the list of what each of those things will require. And his locker happens to be right across the hall from our classroom, and we've made him go get them and come back before he gets to go to the bus. And he's on this bus that there's a lot of kids on, and he hasn't liked the negative peer pressure of making them be held up. So he's seeming to come more and more to the classroom with the planner filled out, with the stuff in his hands. Now the problem is we're having this issue of lying about, yes, I copied it from the board and I have no homework. So now we're to the point we had to send an email to, he's in almost all mainstream, he's in 6 out of 8 classes mainstreamed. So 6 teachers are having to help us with this reporting issue of, is what's in his book really what's due? And we're trying to get the interpreter involved and things like that. So we've gotten a lot done since last time, but we still have a real big issue. Objectively, he's a senior, and most of the actual IEP objectives were written for things like, writing a good 5-paragraph composition. There weren't behavior objectives written. And we didn't have him at the end of last year. He was in an alternate placement. So, which is part of the issue. Some of the people he's having concerns with were at the alternate placement with him for behavior issues. So
right now, what's on his check-in, check-out?
Check-in, check-out is he has to come in and check in. He has to come in and tell us where he's going to be for that 30 minutes. And when we just walk the halls and things, they have to be where it is. And that's completely random. There are 3 teachers, and we just kind of take turns going places for the people who aren't in the room. So that's just to get him ready for the day. Check-out has become a very big mothering. What's your homework for English tonight? What will you need for that? Do you have it in your hands? Oh, no, I'll go to your locker, get it back. What's for math tonight? And because of the block schedule, it helps a little bit because they can do A and B, so 4 and 4. We've also instituted I have a personal promise with him because there are also some addiction issues. So we've started a nightly, don't forget your promise and come back in the next day and tell me that. And that's something he's just admitted this year in front of adults. So, it's a true issue, or I don't think he would say it.
So when he does lie about, with regard to questions about academics, sort of when and what is that typically about?
It's usually an excuse for why something's not done, or for why he looks so tired. And it often is someone at his house's fault, or his mom's fault, or his mom couldn't do it, and this is an adult student. So we have started saying things like, that may be the reason, but we need to not hear any more about why mom didn't do this, And I've been using this thing of, you and I are peers now. We're past the teacher-student relationship. You should have been out here last year. Did I come to you and say last night that my mom couldn't get my poster board? You seem to be able to get all over the country by yourself and all over the city by yourself and to Chicago by yourself. I think you could have gotten to 7-Eleven for the poster board. So a lot of the lying is excuses. It's excuses for why he doesn't have something or why something didn't get completed. That seems to be that issue.
What's the consequence for that?
Well, it's a grade issue, and here we are not graduating in possibly the 5th year. You know, that's why we think maybe leaving high school is very scary. It's one of the probably safest spots that he has with adults who seem to care about him that he says he doesn't have at home. That's another thing we don't know. Some days they don't care about him, and some days they're having the grand reunion family barbecue on a Tuesday night, and he couldn't get to bed till 4. So I don't know. We've really had a hard time knowing when to believe him and when to not anymore because we've been burnt many, many, many times.
What's in his transition?
Well, before he left our building, we were hoping this year to be able to put him into this career tech thing that our new high school has, where he wants to be a chef, and we would like to get him into that, but then we found out you couldn't do that if you didn't have transportation, and this is a student who the family and he hasn't gotten around to getting his license. But he says he would have a ride. We're hoping next year, if we can get him through this year, to get him at some place where there is a Robert Morris or an ECC type program where there is a culinary program. When he's in classes he loves, he does excellent. The follow through at home on homework and the time management's the issue. He's a very, very smart kid. I have him in senior English, and he can write and read. I mean, he's a non-typical hard of hearing kid as far as language. So he would have success in a community college program. The funding, the money, the application process, I probably agree with him whether he's lying or not. Will he have any support at home? Probably not. He has no male role models. No positive male. He has male role models that are very negative. So we feel like we've had some progress since we saw Raven, but it's still a very uphill. You look at the login sheet for 9 weeks, and it's kind of crazy that all that's had to happen with mom and with school. And we did see mom for the first time in I've known this student 5 years, and I've only seen her one other time in 5 years. She did come to a meeting, but he wasn't there that day. He was sick, so he didn't see her at the meeting. But he said she came home and talked to him, and that was kind of ironic. He's never sick, so it's kind of weird.
So what's your next step?
We'll continue the check-in, check-out, and his grades at quarter. He has 1 incomplete, but he did go from failing 2 classes to at least squeaking by with a D. In the check-out process, he was able to, before the quarter ended, get in 2 really major projects that, in my class for one, brought him hugely up, and then in another class also. He finished a test like on the Monday after the quarter, and the teacher let him put it in. He can do the work when he gets to it. The other thing that has happened is we have found out through some internal subbing situations that have come up that if we can know what to do, we help him so much better, and we're not having the kind of communication with the interpreters that we had hoped that this is due and this what's in the project, and let us know that. So now we're trying to start a little worksheet, kind of a quick tally of this is what the teacher said he needs so that we can compare the planner. Because in a day's time, the teachers don't have time to get to us to say, at 2:30 when the kids get on the bus, we don't know what the second period teacher said to know if the planner's right. So we're trying to get that method. The teachers have all willingly put it up on the whiteboard now, because we all do that in our classes, homework due or whatever, and he might have missed it. Anyone that has a whiteboard except for PE has said they'd be glad to switch to that for everybody.
I'm going to add to with the interpreter, what if they could just initial his assignment notebook, just look at that and kind of confirm or get it stamped?
Right, we're kind of trying to stay with that planner because it's such a natural high school thing. I hate for him to have this piece, I feel like a piece of paper that you carry around for the teacher to sign is kind of redundant and so elementary for a 19-year-old. And they have this beautiful planner that works when you use it. So.
Your district doesn't have any web-based kind of iParent?
No, and I would guess, wouldn't have a computer.
No, she means that
you can just pull up.
They've been real frequently. I'm actually not the case manager, but I'm the person on this team, and the case manager has really good response from the teachers. The minute she sent out the thing about could you write on the whiteboard, I think she heard back from all of them either via talking in the hall. It's a small school now, and either through email or through talking in the hallway, but still don't really. Our classes are. I'm not sure if they could get to it by the end of the day. We have great email, but I don't know if they could do it that day.
They don't do anything like that.
No. We don't have the homework already listed. Not all of them. I think some of them do, but And a lot of them are project-based classes because he's a senior. So we're finding that, the teacher loves, all teachers love him. He sits there and he's so interactive in classes, and then when it comes time for this 200-point project because you've been sitting there chatting, you bomb because you didn't bring the poster board, that was in your locker. So,
If your hypothesis is that he's afraid to leave school, what are you doing to ease that transition for him?
probably nothing yet because we're kind of taken up with the getting him through first quarter. We know we need to revisit his transition plan. When he came from the program where he was at, it's very vague. It says needs further exploration. So we're a little concerned about that because it doesn't say it doesn't follow behavior criterion very well for us to know what they expected. We had him before, so we know what we would have expected, and I think that's kind of what we're going to put into place. And we're going to, try to visit the community college programs, and we've done a lot of career exploration already in that area. He's had that culinary dream since he came to us, so that's a really strong one. He had a summer job with the program he came from, though, that was in the food service, we think. That's what he says, that he loved. It was a Dairy Queen. He got to eat. He doesn't eat all day. We think there's been a trade of food calories for other calories. Our real concern right now is health, general health, sleep, food, and we said, for a while we've got to deal with those kinds of things in the morning. He gives up lunch to come in and do homework instead of eating, which we've talked about not being a good thing. So
I was just thinking that if there was an adult that he could make contact with before, it's a transition, so that there's somebody else out there for him, see that it is safe to go, that there is somebody else that is going to be a point person that's not family.
And our DRS person is a male, which is good, although for his area I guess it won't be, but they've seen that person at other people's meetings, so I think they do feel a connection. It's not like some stranger and they're scared of them. They see it come to senior meetings. So yeah, I hope we can get that going. We're also in the situation that we're in a brand new building and we're out in the middle of a place we aren't familiar with. So he drives from a distance. We're in a co-op, and we aren't as tied into services that we were before because of that. So getting him to Aurora in a school day is going to be a little different than it was when we were in our other program. So I think the family mother input is next to nothing. And actually now that he's the age he is, it's too bad that wasn't there 12 years ago. Right now, I think we've got to deal, I keep saying to him, you've got to deal with this. Don't blame whoever. Next year, he'd have to anyway, so. But.
Well, thanks for that happy story.
Yeah. But he's a great student. I love having him in English and the history. He's a history, social studies fanatic, and the teachers just love having his input. And I was in family living with him last week interpreting, and they were doing the marriage thing, where you get together with a girl and a boy, and he had this fake wife, and his responses were just gorgeous. You would have thought he grew up in the happiest family in the whole world, and what should girls do, and I don't really think there should be sexual jobs in a house, and I think if you like this, you should do this, and they should do that, and, I think it would depend on if you should share. He acted like he came from the Brady Bunch when he answered those questions. So whether he soaked that up from reading and TV or whatever, I don't know, but beautiful, beautiful answers from a home that we know isn't so.
Thank you.
If you could make money from being a con man, you should do it. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Okay, great.
Yeah, well, chime in.
It was a team.
Well, we're a big team actually here. I love these. We have one, on the way. We have a student that we've done quite a bit of problem solving, a little preschooler, that we've put several things in place. My frustration before I explain the kid a little bit is I think we need to work on our data collection to see how things are going with this particular kid. We're having some issues in finding something that makes sense for the teacher to be able to do. It's a preschool class. It's a hard place to try to keep data on. So he's a little guy. We have several issues, but we're focusing on his tantruming behaviors, which we have defined as slapping legs, banging head on the floor, moving backwards into people, grabbing items, throwing and destroying items, as what we're calling tantrums. Anything that fits under those kinds of behaviors we're calling tantrums. We do have data that was done by just telling how many bit tantrums were happening a day, and it came out about 3.5 average per day. But some were 5 minutes long, some were reported to be all day. So he can get into these behaviors and not be able to get out of them. So 3 and 4 doesn't sound like a lot, but it can be ones that are going on and on and on. So we did some analysis on the whys and what's happening before. A lot of this was through interviews of teachers, some observations, and as far as getting our baseline data. And we have an 8-page document here on him. there's a lot of stuff. But we have things, hypotheses that we don't really have good data, I don't think, to determine whether they are them. We have the hypothesis that the target behaviors increase when there's changes in his sleep at home. The target behaviors increase when the adult in his environment changes something about them, remove their glasses, take their coats off. Those things can cause these tantrums.
What gives you what kind of information do you have to just come up with a hypothesis in the first place?
Discussion with the teachers, asking them what kinds of things happened before, but at the beginning, and the parents were involved too, to talking about what kinds of things we see before these behaviors. But we're moving towards, I think we need some more data that's more concrete. And not just, well, I think when somebody takes their glasses off, that seems to disturb him. Well, I think, so we're getting some of those kinds of things. In the same hypothesis that I don't think we have totally confirmed or rejected yet, that we need more data on, is when staff are working with another student, that seems to bother him. When he's expected to have a long wait time for his turn or for whatever, or even if the lesson, such as a story, is too long and he's expected to sit for a story for too long. So those are the kinds of things. We all know this kind of kid. We've seen this kid. So those are the kinds of things that are going on. There are some things that are in place in the classroom already to try to help him through some of these transitions, such as picture schedules. He's a kid that really, really relies on print more than the picture. So also have the words with the pictures. So we put several things in place to try to help him out with this. We talked about offering choices when he's calm, but limiting choices when he's upset. It seems to help when we use the sign must. When he really needs to do something, it's not an option now. For this kid to tell him when this is something that really must happen, using the sign and the word and even the printed word must. Picture schedules in place to assist adults that he's connected with in doing the changes that they need, like going with them to take their coat off. So these are some of the sort of things we've put in place to try to set him up for success. We've made word cards that have some of these words of things that have to do with transitions where he has trouble, so that they're used: must and stop and ready, calm, I want, and more, as cues to give him not just the sign, which he doesn't connect with as much as the printed word. We've made social stories too. We made a book that has some of his favorite teachers with their coat on and happy face, coat off and happy face, and we have glasses on and a happy face, and glasses off and a happy face, and actually have used that story for a while. And same thing, we see the teacher saying, well, that seems to be working. So that's my frustration right now. We're putting several things into place to assist him. Well, that seems to be working, but we don't really have the data. Is he just growing older? Are these things we're putting in place? And there's several things. I mean, there's more things that we're doing to put in place to sort of help him out. We have we also have some crisis prevention stuff that we have in place, that when he's unsafe, there's a safe place in the room with a mat, and all the people are CPI certified, so that if there does need to be hands-on, that he can be moved safely. So those things are in place in his plan that talk about when that's appropriate to have hands-on and when not. And so we're trying to get data from the teacher, and she's doing logs, basically. And it's hard to take this data. This is where my frustration is. Some of these things that we're doing seem to be working, seem to be helping, but I feel like our data is not really clearly connected with some of the behaviors, and the tantrums are less what piece of what we've put in place is helping, what should we continue with. Obviously we're continuing all the stuff because it seems to be helping, but I'd like to see more help with our data collection, figuring out how to do that in a preschool that has several kids in it, where you're moving around to different stations, and you've got what? He has a one-on-one teacher assistant, but whenever she has a paper or pencil, he gets very distracted by that and wants to know what he's into print, so he wants to know what he's writing. Sometimes she'll write student's name, sit down on the paper, and he will. I've used that too when I've been in there observing him. So we have a lot of log type data, but I don't know what kind of data system would help us move forward to the next step of his plan. Because we have good individual pieces in plan for him, things that are definitely assisting him and moving him along, but it's kind of fuzzy mushy.
Your enrich plan, though, is not focused on one behavior. It's focused on this
tantrums.
And
that was narrow compared to what the teachers brought to us. That was narrowed down.
But I think if you're a researcher, I think you're really interested in what are the most effective components of this package. I think as educators, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I don't care which part is making it work. But I agree with you that what we'd like to have is some sort of quantitative index of success so that we could begin to fade pieces of this out and know if that makes a difference. If you start fading out one piece and the data starts to come down, then I'm going to say, let's not fade that piece. And we can kind of figure out which of those components are effective. But if you're kind of fading lots of things at once and all you're getting is log data, if something isn't working, we're not really going to know what to do next. So I think it would be really helpful to get some sort of data on, beyond tantrums, what's our biggest issue for this child, and how do we start to grab some of that information so we can see how we can move his behavior in the right direction and fade out some of these things. We'd like that package to shrink over time to the point where it's really portable and they can carry it with them. Right now it's
It's big. I didn't even say them all.
Yeah. But I think that, you throw everything out there and if it works, you don't want to yank anything out.
And he's better, is the reports we're getting. He's so much better this year. But he's also the kind of kid that could change tomorrow, too. We know that, and that, yeah. Yes. Yeah. Home and school really on the same page with what they're saying pretty much. And parents have been a part of this, too, this problem-solving process. We've met on him many times.
And they're positively involved.
But he's a very complicated kid. Lots going on, neurological involvement, and lots of other things too. But he's not a kid that's going to be a short-term person on our problem-solving radar for sure. But what kinds of, what kinds of data can we focus on that's easy for teachers to get? We do have the ability to bring in outside people, social workers, myself as the interventionist, and psychologists can come in and do some data collection too. But I feel like we don't have a real clear focus as to what we're trying to collect data on and where we're going with it.
I think you need to prioritize a set of behaviors and say, here's what we'd really like data on now because if we could make this behavior turn, this would make the biggest difference in this kid's life right now. So let's focus on that behavior. And I think we did that with tantrums, which I agree would be one that's important for him, for the other kids, for the teachers.
Safety.
What's next?
Yeah.
What's the next priority? And then just take
tantrums aren't gone; they're just left.
Right. But take data on that next thing. I don't think you want to ever get to the position of saying, this kid's got 10 different problems, let's take great data on all 10, because no way. And just prioritize what's your next thing you can really go after.
No. Thank you. I'll get my coat.
And the microphone.
Oh yeah, you probably like that back, huh?
Thank you. Next. Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah.
All right, well, we have a student who has very low self-esteem, very just poor self-image of himself and his abilities and his work. So over the last couple of years, we've been working on building that up, and we were kind of half-heartedly joking. It was like we're putting all these positives into this kid and giving him all these positives, and then it was like he walked away and there was like a hole in his sock and like everything fell out. So this year, we finally, it seemed like we're getting, like, the stuff was sticking. Like, we sewed that hole up a little bit, and he was really starting to do well. I started check in and check out with him, and it actually kind of had the opposite effect on this student, and I'm not really sure why. For this past week, we've been doing it, and his first class, he's been having a really difficult time, and it's really perplexing to us because this is a kid who likes that teacher attention and that teacher one-on-one time. So we're not really sure what is going on with that. And once we get him through that first class, then he's fine. But it's almost like that expectation or that reminder of his behavior. All right, let's have a good day, or whatever. Kind of almost gets that anxiety and that thought of himself failing, maybe, or thinking. So we're not really sure where we're going to go with that. But overall, before we started that, we were really seeing some good changes in this student and his behaviors. We did a picture card system with him, which we made up on BoardMaker, and it's basically a step system that he has to, if he's having a difficult time, he'll use this picture system to kind of help himself use calming techniques. So the first thing, he's a kid that escape is one of his motives, and he gets frustrated during his work, and so he'll have a meltdown, throw himself on the floor. It was in January of last year to the point where he would tip over desks and anything that he could get his hands on, destroy and throw around the room. And so since we implemented this system with him, he's using the steps, and all it takes is a reminder or pointing to his step, or, oh, it looks like you're having a hard time, why don't you move back? And then he moves back. He doesn't feel like he has to be with the group. He doesn't feel like that pressure to participate. And so it gives him just a little bit of time to slow himself down, calm himself down, and then he can participate from back there. And we've seen him starting to participate from being removed from the group. He's still able to participate, and when he can, when he feels that he's able, and we give him cues, are you ready to move up? Or, we still interact with him, gauging on how we see his body language and things like that, and he's able to move back up into the group. So this is just one thing that we've used with him. It's actually just this half. So he's at the group at the table, then he moves back, he takes a break within the classroom. So starting to kind of work with the simplest interventions, or keeping him in the classroom so that he can still be actively involved. If he's not actively involved, he can still passively be seeing what's going on in the classroom. If that's not working to calm him, then maybe taking a walk in the hallway with his assistant or things like that seem to be helping him to calm down. And then the last one here, there's a hall pass, so that's the walking around, and this one's like a little tantrum. The kid's flailing, and then it points an arrow to him calming down. So when he gets to that point, then we use this other card with him, which is just basically a reminder of to calm himself down, take deep breaths, sit, crisscross, we tell him, calm down. And so the pictures really work. It's a primary student, a first grade student. So those things seem to really be working with him, but I don't know, we were kind of in like shock or mystery why with the check in and check out, yeah.
If it's not working.
Yeah, so we figure we just, not do that and see if that was what was causing it. So this week we're not going to do check in, check out, and see if that first hour he kind of gets back into the flow of things and if it's better. And if not, then reevaluate. Maybe there's something in that class. We know that's a class that's always been difficult for him. So maybe that just extra pressure of giving him that reminder in the morning.
Does the check in, check out make any difference after the first period where he has problems with it, or is it just?
He's always had where we go over, and basically it's the same thing. We have the 3 things. Did you try your best? Did you listen to teachers and assistants? Did you have good friend behavior? And we do that after every class with him, and then he kind of self-evaluates and we talk about that, and that's where we put in a lot of those positives and kind of don't really focus on, well, you didn't, you did maybe answered 2 questions, but we wouldn't focus on that. We would say, did you try your best today? Oh, you didn't answer a lot of questions, but you were really good about, being a good friend. You weren't loud and bothering the other kids, so that was really good. And you listened to your teachers and assistants. You moved yourself back. You worked through your steps. So that's where we're getting a lot of those positives to throw in, and that seems to be working well with him.
So it's just be check in.
Yeah, it's the initial at the beginning of the day that we saw this week. So I'm not sure. We haven't done that before, and this week was the worst behavior we've seen in that morning time. So.
To pull it out there.
Yeah, so we're going to try that and see. Another thing, when Daniel was there, he suggested having the student let us know how he's feeling by using the stoplight system, which we have a stoplight in our room. It's not for their behavior, just like stop. Remember, we use sign language here. But so the student will cue, and he's been using that this week, not in that morning time as much. But just randomly throughout the day, he'll come over and slap the yellow, and I'll be like, and then we can know that he's kind of feeling he needs a little something, and so that seems to be working well with him. So I don't know, we'll see.
Does the data that you get from your existing check in, check out, whatever you were using before you did check in, check out, do you keep that data?
Yeah.
So how does that look over time?
We started that system last year, and it dramatically improved his behavior. Just that after every class, evaluating his behavior, he was going, I don't have the data with me here, but off the top of my head, I'd say at least 70% improvement in his behavior, and the types of intensity of the behaviors. Like I was saying, we were seeing the tipping a desk, the throwing of papers, anything he could get his hands on, to now maybe he's not participating the whole time, but he's not destroying the room. He's not bothering the other kids. He'll move himself back and take that time, and then he's able to rejoin the group in the activity without the full-blown, okay, we got to get everybody out of the room because we're afraid for the other kids' safety. So it really has helped, and just like I said, I think all those positives that we're able to give him, instead of focusing on the negative, you didn't try your best, or you didn't, do this, or you didn't do that, we try to just give him a real quick, oh, you didn't do that, but you blah, blah, blah. So how are we gonna, and then we'll give him the reminder for whatever it was that he didn't do well. We'll maybe give him a reminder, all right, so let's try to work on that for the next class. You keep up the good friend behavior and keep up the listening to your teachers and assistants. And so always trying to end with a positive with the student.